Welcome. This is Natasha Edwina. Welcome to the Oasis of Awareness, where we dive deep into systemic change through positivity, pleasure, playfulness, and partnership. And I would love to introduce to you my guest today, Sarah Schwab, licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, music lover, dog lover, also my best friend. And we are here to talk about what the health is going on lately. Sarah, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, my dear.
So I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about your educational background and what you do, and my educational background and what I do, and how we both work in these whole medical systems, this holistic type medicine. And I want people to know that orientation and that philosophy before we dive into this conversation so they can take that into consideration. And so maybe we should start by telling the story about how we first met 20 years ago, because I think that's when it started. All of this health stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were both very young and had the same dream, essentially. A little bit different paths, but very much the same goal, ultimately, is helping people with holistic health.
It's so much fun now to look back over our 20-year journey and see how, we've morphed and changed and our careers have, gone into this direction. And here we are, still staying connected with this health conversation. I've got 2 kids, you've got 2 dogs. There they are.
Not here with me, as always.
Yeah. Where should we begin? Where your career has evolved at this point?
I am now an acupuncturist, an herbalist, and functional medicine practitioner. My office is in the Atwater Village neighborhood of Los Angeles. There's been a lot of changes lately, obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic going through the world. I did close my office for about 6 weeks. Actually closed it before the city closed. Before the quarantine safer at home order was put in effect, because we just didn't know what was happening. We didn't have good data out of China. We know that this is a dangerous and deadly disease. We didn't know how dangerous and deadly at that point. We're getting some more good data in now. So as of 3 days ago, I reopened my office with enhanced safety protocols and started treating patients, half as many as I would usually treat, because I'm spacing everyone out so there's no overlap. There's plenty of time for the room to air out, all of that. That's been an interesting transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important for anybody watching to know that certain healthcare businesses were allowed to stay open, and acupuncturist is one of those, but it was a personal discretion.
Yes.
And I think that it's really interesting because things like acupuncture, while you're a primary care provider, you do treat illnesses and diagnose and treat illnesses, but you also offer a lot of preventative medicine so that people don't get sick. When they first, start having some sort of weird symptom, they come to you so it doesn't develop into an illness. And so at a time when we are really concerned about getting sick with something, it seems like we should be seeing acupuncturists, chiropractors, going to yoga, these things even more. So what the health is going on, Sarah?
And that's the optimal way to practice Chinese medicine. Is the idea is you don't treat when somebody gets sick. You treat to prevent them from getting sick. And I see it. I have patients who come to me every week, every 2 weeks, once a month, whatever it might be, whatever works with their schedule, their finances, their, personal life considerations. They come to me to stay balanced and healthy, and they do. They stay healthy. But if they do get a little something that comes up, they're right there right away. They're already have the appointment scheduled. They've got a recurring thing. It's on the books. And it's not something that goes 2 months because they're too busy to find the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, preventative care is huge, and there's so much that we can do in terms of diet, nutrition, lifestyle to keep ourselves healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want a magic pill, and so often the answer is eat right, get enough sleep, exercise, manage your stress. It's basics, but that's not sexy or exciting, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. So it gets lost in the conversation oftentimes.
It's not dramatic.
Yeah.
This high drama thing. It's a very subtle but powerful
Yeah.
thing. And I know with traditional Chinese medicine, so I took a class in whole medical systems in my PhD, mind body medicine. And one of the things that was really interesting in the philosophical underpinnings of whole medical systems is they compared and contrasted Western medicine with Chinese medicine or Eastern medicine. And the experts, or the symbol of Western medicine, is like this Greek muscled, very hard-bodied, masculine man, right? And the symbol in Eastern is a softer kind of meditator of a man with a little Buddha belly, and and they said it's a hardness and a softness in looking at the whole, the intuitive knowing. I know I've been treated by you many times, and it's the tongue diagnosis, it's looking at the facial characteristics. There's so many things that you're tuning into that Western medicine doesn't even acknowledge.
So in Chinese medicine, when we talk about a cold or a flu, we talk about climactic factors as part of the puzzle. It's not that we don't think that there are viruses and bacteria. It's just that the environment that you are in impacts your immune system and how things present. And we all have that experience where you're out in, say, the cold and the wind, and lo and behold, you become sick. Well, is there something to where you definitely got exposed to a virus, or is it climactic? Honestly, we don't know for sure at that point. If there are some that are completely climactic illnesses, or if there's always a viral or bacterial component, doesn't matter to me. That's what's cool about Chinese medicine, is there's 2,000 years plus of experience. So when a novel virus comes along, for instance, there's 2,000 years of experience to build upon, because there are all kinds of disease descriptions in our source text. By the way, the Chinese historically dealt with horrendous viruses. You read some of the symptoms described in the formula indications, some of them are just insane. And thank God a lot of these just don't apply. Viruses and illnesses, they come and go to a certain degree. So in Chinese medicine, we talk about wind heat or wind cold. Those are the basic fundamentals when we're talking about an exterior pathogen, is what we would call it. Wind heat in particular, what you see is that hot sore throat. You see mucus that's thick and yellow and difficult to expectorate. You'll see headaches. You'll see maybe some chills, but more predominantly fever. With wind cold, we see predominantly chills, maybe some feverishness. We'll see more of a like scratchy throat, clear mucus, more of a runny mucus. So we break down these patterns, and sometimes it's a mixed pattern, and it gets very, very involved. This is a very cursory description of what we're looking for when we're diagnosing and treating external invasions of any sort. And that's what's cool is, in the first few weeks of this whole pandemic unraveling, myself and all my colleagues were hurriedly becoming COVID herbalist experts, and thankfully not a single one of my patients has had it. One is suspected, her test came back negative, but the doctor suspected she had it. And thankfully she's okay, because she's on immunosuppressant. She has a very suppressed immune system because of an autoimmune disease, which was brought on by pharmaceuticals, by the way, but side note. And thankfully, she is home. She was hospitalized twice for severe chest pain. Thankfully, she's home, and she wasn't on a respirator or anything terrible like that. But all of my other patients have been good. And, I have no idea how much of that has to do with just the population is that they are seeking acupuncture care. They are taking better care of themselves than the general population. I did email everybody, and, when everything was breaking out, and just say, hey, really take care of your immune systems, take care of yourselves, focus on vitamin C, getting it from your foods. If you need to supplement with it. Vitamin D, selenium, vitamin A, vitamin E, get sunshine, meditate, do this breathing exercise, control stress, all of those holistic things that are so important to keep your immune system strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And you reminded me that I made this disclaimer in the last video that I did with Dr. Jen Gonzalez, who's a PhD sociologist, sexologist, that these YouTube episodes aren't meant to diagnose or treat or anything like that. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have training in mind-body medicine, but I'm not a medical doctor. Sarah is a primary care provider. She's licensed to diagnose and treat, but nobody here are her patients. I mean, her patients might watch, but she cannot diagnose. I cannot diagnose and treat anybody that is not a client or, in Sarah's case, a patient. So this information that we're giving you is simply education and information to share and to consider. Give you some information from what we know from our background, but also bring up some philosophical questions, because I think that it's my personal belief that every client that I work with and every person is the expert of their own body. And you mentioned your patient that got an autoimmune disease from pharmaceuticals. So I respect doctors. I respect their, I think they have the best intentions most of the time, almost all the time. I've rarely had a doctor that didn't have good intentions, but sometimes they feel almost like an ego thing if you give them information that they don't know. They're like, oh, that doesn't exist because it's not what I was taught. And so if you have a doctor that's willing to drop their ego and understand that the client actually has had however many years walking around in their body, waking up with their aches and pains, their symptoms, just gathering all of that evidence and understanding that they are ultimately the expert of their body. And if their intuition is firing when the doctor gives them this particular treatment, that has to be honored. And I mean, I almost died when I was a teenager from appendicitis. I was walking around with a burst appendix for about a week. And at the time, there wasn't any medical literature that showed, that I'm aware of, that showed that a person could do that was physically possible. And so when I went in to see the doctor was shocked that I was still alive, and shocked at how somehow my abdominal cavity had walled off this infection for a week. And I was walking around with this poison in my abdomen. And by the time he sliced me open, he said everything just came out, and they had to actually remove my internal organs and wash them off basically and put them back in me. And then I had a drainage tube for the rest of the summer out of my abdomen. So, and they almost lost me halfway through because it was such an advanced case of appendicitis. So knowing that, I have deep respect for the medical community. I have deep respect for emergency medicine surgeons. That doctor obviously saved my life when I came back into awareness after the morphine wore off. It was a spiritual experience for me because there was no good reason for me to still be alive. The odds were stacked against me. And so I realized that there's something bigger. I mean, it could have been coincidence or chance, but there's something bigger, I think, that I'm supposed to do here. And I had that at a very young age, that awareness. And so experiences like that got me really curious about what else goes into health, what else is going on here to keep us well. And then also I spent 10 days in the hospital. That was not a place that was conducive to health. You know, I was terribly bored. I couldn't eat anything but sip on broths. That was before internet and cell phones, and we didn't even have cable. I think we had one channel in my small town. And there's other ways to be healthy. So looking into that whole thing, you mentioned sunshine, you mentioned meditation. These are the things that I am getting a PhD in, is all of those other ways to be healthy besides just the pills, just the ultimate emergency medicine. And I was at the beach yesterday and walked around barefoot I was at Moonlight in Encinitas. It's a beach apparently that never did close during this whole time. And I slept better last night than I've slept in weeks and weeks. I've slept so good. Just the ocean air, the sunshine, the sand, my feet on the sand, great conversation. The lifeguards were really lovely too. They were, if they saw people that weren't walking and they were starting to kind of loiter, they're like, hey guys, break it up. Like, you can't loiter, you got to keep moving. Otherwise you're going to lose the right to be at the beach. Let's keep it classy, San Diego. So I really appreciate that middle of the road approach, that integrative approach. We here in San Diego realize how much the beach and the sun brings us life. So how do we not totally cut that out because of this virus that's coming? So I don't know if there's anything that you want to say about that whole big picture.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As you know, but not everybody in our audience necessarily knows, is the reason, one of the main reasons why that was so great. Obviously, going to the beach, it's relaxing, it's lovely, you're getting sun, but you're also soaking up so many negative ions from that sand, which has a very direct impact on your health. We don't walk around barefoot anymore, and we lose that. And that's something that we are meant to do as humans, is have contact with the earth. The rays of the sun come down and they put this energy into the earth. And if we walk around barefoot on the earth, we soak up these negative ions. And it's proven, there's study after study that shows how amazing these negative ions are for our health. When you're walking around in rubber shoes all day, you are not getting the benefit from the earth. So I'm barefoot right now. I treat patients barefoot. When my patients are changing, I walk into my backyard and walk around on the grass. I'm very lucky to be able to do that.
Yes.
I have a lot of control over my environment, and I'm very lucky with that. Even things like, you're talking about the hospital. The lighting in every hospital is atrocious. What do? They close the drapes and then turn on fluorescent lights. Like it's a little thing ultimately when you're in the hospital, but why? Open the drapes. I've been in the position twice with family members who had surgery, and I'm there day in, day out. What do? I turn off those lights and I open the drapes and I battle the nurses back and forth. They turn on the lights, they turn them off, because obviously they need light to do what they're doing. But if there's plenty of sunlight coming in, there is absolutely no reason to have these terrible fluorescent lights over you.
Mm-hmm.
These little things in our environment that we have control over, but often don't think to exert control over them.
Yeah, it reminds me too of EMF, electromagnetic frequencies. We're talking about everything is energy. So our human body is energy. At the center of our cells, it's not solid matter, it's energy. You practice energy medicine in traditional Chinese medicine, they call it qi. I think in Ayurvedic medicine, it's prana. You're talking about negative ions from the earth, from the ocean. There's crystals that hold energy, and people are like, oh, that's nonsense. But there's actually, we use crystals in printers and watches, to power and amplify energy. So our devices, our computer that we are grateful for these things because it's how we're connecting right now. But also, how can we minimize our exposures to these things, because they impact our energy, and it can create, especially to people who are energetically sensitive, it can create a lot of fatigue, headaches, tension, these sorts of things. And I know I shared a video with you, Sarah, that I watched a few weeks ago about energy medicine from some biophysicists that have been studying and doing their own experiments for 20 plus years, each of them, about what we can do. And one of the things the biophysicist at the end said is trace minerals are so important. And I remember you telling me years ago, if you use reverse osmosis water, put some trace minerals in there, because everything is cleaned out. Now, reverse osmosis is important because it helps, from my understanding, take out the fluoride, the chlorine, possibly even, I don't know if it takes out the pharmaceuticals that get dumped in the water. Does it?
Yes, purification. Yeah.
Okay, but it also takes out all the minerals too. So you have to add them back in, because those trace minerals are vitally important to the cell and cellular nutrition. So even, again, nutrition is energy. Our food has energy. A package of Cheetos has no, well, I don't want to say has no energy, but it's going to be very
low vibration energy.
Low vibration is going to be very different from, a fresh batch of strawberries, or especially strawberries perhaps that were picked by yourself, like grown in the sun with their own, not even washed, but with their organic and natural chemicals. It actually has some probiotic qualities to it. It's about being mindful of all of these things that we're putting into our body, that we're engaging with. And I think that now, most of my work is online. Even before this happened, about 80% of my work is online. But I did do workshops and hypnosis and some speaking engagements at a wellness center called Vera Via here in Carlsbad. And that had to shut down because it's inside of a hotel, which had to shut down. And so that did take away some of my income and some of my referral source. But now that I'm completely inside, I'm using a lot of tech. I'm immersed, and I live in a condo, so I've got everybody else's Wi-Fi shooting in on me, and my pool is closed. I didn't realize how much I actually use my pool until it's closed now. And I have a patio that right now has some sun, but it doesn't roll in until about this time of day. So I only get just a little bit of afternoon sun before it gets too cold. And so being on the beach and soaking in all of that nature, it was just so beautiful. And then today I went to the bank, and I normally don't do this when I'm driving around. I have my tinted windows and I keep my windows closed to keep out the smog or whatever else, but I just really needed air. So I've just been so appreciative of air. So I had the windows down, I had the roof, the moon roof open, and took the long route back along the ocean, and just had the music blasting, and it was so nice. Even something like that, just so good for my soul. It completely rejuvenated me.
Well, we've had this lovely air through all of this too, which has been
Yes.
side effects, and hopefully more people will be able to telecommute after this.
Mm-hmm.
People see that it works. So hopefully the traffic and pollution in big cities will improve to some degree. We'll see.
Yeah, this is a conversation that I hope comes out of this, is how can we do things better? Like we already had this little trial run. So how can we have cleaner technology? How can we develop frequencies that power our phones that actually work with our body instead of making our body fatigued and sick and whatever else? How can we have transportation that is cleaner and doesn't hurt our lungs and make us sick? And I mean, we're breathing in metals from the gasoline in the air. For those of us who we're trying to avoid metals in our protein powders or in our foods or in our soils or in our vaccines, but then we have to breathe it in through the air, that's a problem. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can be more mindful about the reopening and maybe things that we can do again, that are in the middle, that are integrative, where we can still go on with life, but do it in a healthier way.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is there is this certain percentage, the best estimation as far as I can tell at this point is 20% of people who are infected with COVID-19 are asymptomatic. What does that tell us? Well, presumably that their immune systems have prevented the virus from infecting their cells, or at least prevented it from infecting enough of their cells for them to be symptomatic, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's really important. Like, that's just glossed over. Mm-hmm. In such a huge way. You know, I really wish that there were voices at the top who were talking about that in a holistic way, of the simple things that everybody can do, of, you know, eat a diet full of, you know, varied fruits and vegetables. There's a reason for that, you know, that boring advice that your grandmother and mother gave you, it's for a very good reason. You know, if you are eating packaged foods, or even if you're eating, I have some patients that I battle with them because they're like, okay, well, I'll eat vegetables, but all they'll eat is cauliflower. I'm like, you need other vegetables. Like, cauliflower is great, but there's a reason for the varied diet recommendation. So for instance, vitamin C, very simple, right? Everybody knows citrus, oranges, grapefruit, lemons, limes, all great sources. But you know what? It's better. Bell peppers, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, papayas, strawberries, pineapple, all of those have more vitamin C than oranges, by the way. Zinc. Zinc is very important for your immune system. Highest concentrations in food, they're going to be from beef and lamb. You're going to get about 4 milligrams per 4 ounces in each of those. Some vegetarian sources are really good too. Sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, garbanzo beans, cashews, spinach, lentils, quinoa, all of those are great sources of zinc. So you can see where the variety is really important. And it's good to, you know, look some of these up sometimes to say, okay, well, am I eating the right foods to supply my body with the nutrition that it needs? Mm-hmm. Vitamin A, sweet potatoes, carrots, spinach, kale, pretty much all dark leafy greens. The dark leafy greens are amazing. They really pack a lot of nutrition. A good solution to get in a lot of dark leafy greens that I recommend for some of my patients, not all of my patients, is a green smoothie. If you have a good blender, like a Vitamix or even like a Ninja, pack 6 smashed cups full of dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, collard greens, all of those. and about a cup of fruit, mixed berries, maybe even some pineapple or banana, but the berries are going to be your best bet in terms of antioxidant powerhouses. Throw in some flax seeds, a little bit of water. That's all you need. Just blend it up. Protein powder is great in there too. I like vegan protein powder. And you get so much nutrition. It's so filling. That is great for a lot of people. I don't recommend smoothies for people who have weak digestive systems. People, at least the cold raw aspect. Some people, they really need to work on their digestive system. It's not that the smoothie's the problem, it's that their digestive system is not strong enough. So people who eat a salad and their stomach gets really bloated and uncomfortable after, those are people who, they don't have enough, what we in Chinese medicine term digestive fire. Sometimes it's digestive enzymes. They're not producing enough digestive enzymes because they're under chronic stress. That's very true.
You just read my mind, and here's where our work really crosses over. I remember back in the early years when you would treat me and you would ask me, how's your digestion? And I'd be like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But then I, lived in a house with black mold, and I got to learn the hard way how digestion operates, and having those mycotoxins in my body completely made me so sick. And I had to use herbs and food to come back into health, basically, and understand the gut-brain connection. And so that's what I was going to say as I was listening to you, is that those foods that we eat, we can't properly absorb, or even supplements, we can't properly absorb them unless we have good digestion. It won't absorb. So what are we receiving? And it kind of reminds me, I like to look in the bigger levels of, like, when you see this data or you see something in front of you, a truth, but you can't receive it, you can't even absorb it because of your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, or whatever it is. It kind of reminds me of something like that. It's not going to go in. And so how do we fix our digestion? Yeah. And stress, is a huge piece. Sleep, stress. And then there's certain practices and certain foods, I think, to avoid that really can destroy our digestive health.
Absolutely.
Which then impacts our mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly you want to stay away from the processed foods. A really simple way to think about it is, are we eating things that are causing inflammation, or are they quelling inflammation? Because ultimately, that's the source of most chronic health problems. That's, again, bringing it back to the topic of the day. In COVID-19, what we're seeing in the sickest patients is a cytokine storm. We're seeing an immune system that's out of balance. It is, it's unable to mount a strong enough immune system response to the pathogen. And then it's overactivated, and you have this cytokine storm where these inflammatory chemicals, which we think of inflammation as always bad. It's not bad. We need inflammation to heal us, but we need a good balance. That's why the vitamin D is so good, by the way, is because vitamin D is a potent immunomodulator. Omega-3 fatty acids, same thing. So, but most people, they eat way too many omega-6 fatty acids. Those are the type of fatty acids that are going to be in your processed foods, fried foods. I mean, honestly, most foods, except for your healthy vegetables, fruits. So salmon is a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. Sockeye salmon is especially low in mercury. You always want to do wild caught. You don't want to do farmed because they're eating corn. They're no longer, or other grains. They're no longer good sources of omega-3 fatty acids if it's farmed. Sardines are another good form, which I know your children will eat, which I will not. So I feed them to my dogs, but I won't touch them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they crack them up and they'll eat them right out of the tin. It still amazes me.
I wish I liked it. Just a fishy fish thing for me. I can't do it. But
well, on that note of sardines, I follow Dr. Bruce Lipton, and so I'm on his newsletter, and I just love him. I just love everything that he puts out, and he's just so full of joy and health and passion and just good common sense, as well as, pushing the envelope of like the new paradigm and the new health and all of this. And he had said in his newsletter a while back that by 2048, which is not too far off, 28 years, right? There will be no more fish in the oceans. And I was like, how is this? Oh my gosh. Like, is this really, could this be true? And so I had to go Google it and check that to see if that was true. And sure enough, I found several articles of environmentalists and scientists saying the same thing. And then my daughter's like, why can't will they stop having babies? Like, why won't there be fish? And so I was like, I don't know. It's probably the chemicals in the ocean and I was thinking pollution, right? But actually what they said in the articles that I found is that it was over farming the large fish. So because we're overeating unfortunately the salmons, which I love, tuna, like all of the other large fish, that the small fish are overgrowing, it's messing up the food chain. And so if we want to help keep fish around, and it's, the overfishing, that we should be eating more sardines and we should be eating more of the small fish. And of course, those are the ones that are accumulating less toxins too, because they're smaller fish. So I don't know, like sardines, put some Cholula on it. I'm telling you, people that I used to work with hated me for this when I had the sardine and Cholula lunch because they don't smell good when you open up the sardines. But I'm telling you, if you put the sardines on a lettuce spear and put enough Cholula on there and wrap it up, it actually tastes like tuna to me. It's not that much difference. I like it. It's quick, it's easy, it's super, super healthy.
Yeah. Yes, mackerel also great options in terms of the small fish that aren't bioaccumulating the mercury, that are good sources of omega-3 fatty acids.
Well, let's talk about this. This is something that is, I'm trying to think of the right word. I would just say irritating. Let's just use the word irritating. With all the government guidelines right now, literally during a crisis, there are so many things documented in scientific journals that we are talking about right now. Nutrition, academic research, textbooks written on it. It's integrated as a foundational science and theory into my PhD program. It's integrated into your learning and what you do. But somehow during a crisis on the governmental level, we're only being told to wash our hands, avoid contact with the germ or the bacteria, the pathogen. So germ theory versus terrain. And what about all of the other things? So I think this is what you alluded to. Why aren't they telling us to up our vitamin D when that is so established in the literature? Up our vitamin C. And then now it seems like there's censorship on certain people broadcasting and sharing this information, not for profit, but for health. And one thing I get a little bit irritated with is when people say I share nutritional information for my own profit, because I know you sell supplements as part of your practice. I also sell supplements as part of my practice. And yeah, you get a little bit of a commission or, whatever else for these things, typically as part of doing business. I don't think that I'm going to become a billionaire by recommending people take vitamin D. And yet, that accusation, is really interesting. And even you and I both are in the healthcare business. Now we're both business owners. A shutdown economy isn't in our best interest. However, even in a recession or even a depression, you and I are still going to be people that are likely going to have a thriving business because we work in health. And that is one of the things that's going to be needed. So I just mentioned that too, as our positionality and where we're kind of coming from. I get really tired of the accusations of, oh, you're financially motivated. Guess what? According to Forbes, 78% of the population lives paycheck to paycheck. I would think 78% of the population at minimum is interested in the economy getting back together and making money so that they can actually eat and feed their families. But the question is now, it seems, how do we do that in the most mindful way? So anyway, my original question had to do with why aren't they talking about this? What are your ideas?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all because it's a continuation of what we've seen of the medical paradigm. Yeah. It's unfortunately been the case for a really long time, is we've gotten away from the idea of taking care of yourself, acting in a way that's preventative. If somebody goes to see their doctor, basically they will only talk about nutrition if they have high cholesterol, and then they'll give them a one-page printout, a handout of avoid cholesterol. They don't even have a discussion of, well, maybe your cholesterol is high because you have systemic inflammation, so therefore your body's creating more cholesterol in order to combat that. Well, that's what the research shows. They're not even going to get into that. As you said, I love doctors. Same thing. I refer to doctors. I work alongside doctors. I agree that they are well-meaning. And many of them, they are trapped in the insurance system game.
Yes.
Because their hands are tied in terms of the amount of time that they can spend talking to patients. One of my patients, actually, I haven't seen him for years because, so he was working for Kaiser. He's an MD, family practitioner, and he came to me on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So he was coming to me for anxiety. So he's a doctor, and he was so frustrated because he hated his job so much. And not because of Kaiser, it was everywhere, but in particular Kaiser. You tell me how, oh yeah, I got reprimanded today because I've been spending more than 8 minutes with patients. It might be 9 minutes or 10 minutes, but it's supposed to be 8 minutes or under. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't do his job. He was trying to do right by his patients. And 8 minutes, that's insane. I scheduled 2 hours for a new patient. We'd spend an hour plus just in intake. Not everybody needs that. Lo and behold, by the way, that doctor was so stressed out because he hated his job, but he had so much pressure because, he's got all of this medical school debt and he needs to make a good living. He had tons of pressure from his parents and his wife. Guess what he did? He went to acupuncture school. Because he fell in love with medicine, because guess what? We get to make real change. And again, not that doctors don't, but I went to school with several MDs who they were just so fed up with not being able to make real change within that system. So I don't think it's the MDs. I do think it's the system. Pro tip for anybody watching, if you're trying to figure out how to find a good MD, maybe look for a DO, a doctor of osteopathy. Their paradigm is that they are more trained to look at the body holistically. They are much more versed in musculoskeletal issues too. So many people that go to their doctor for back pain and their doctor doesn't look at their back. If they don't touch it, they don't feel it. They don't, they'll maybe lift their leg. They'll do a straight leg test, which is one very basic thing we do. And then maybe they'll tell them to take Tylenol these days. Now that there's very little pain meds given out, they'll tell them to take Advil and maybe give it an x-ray when they know the x-ray won't help. So then they end up at my door, and I see countless patients who have been through the ringer with the medical system. They've seen 8, 10, 12 doctors. They've gotten 20 diagnoses, whatever it is. I give an extensive intake form. It's 3 pages that I start with. And then depending on what somebody's treating, I might give them a 2-page metabolic questionnaire on top of that. I might give them a neurotransmitter questionnaire on top of that. Even with that, I have patients who come in with 5 pages worth of symptoms and descriptions. I mean, that's not the norm, but that happens. By the time people come to see me, oftentimes they are so sick. They have been on so many medications. They've been to all the doctors and they just get worse. Again, not everybody. I don't see the people who are, they go to their doctor fixes their problem. I don't see that person. They're done. It's a skewed population for sure, but there are a lot of people like that, as you know as well, working on the mental health aspect of it too.
Yeah, I mean, after 20 years of working in mental health and then crossing over into nutrition and mental health and the mind-body medicine. And by the way, my PhD program was designed to build a bridge between the medical system that you're talking about that's not working and integrating what you do into the medical system. So we're supposed to be the bridge makers. That's why it's a PhD. It's not a clinical degree. It's a doctor of philosophy because it's research based. It's looking at the research, and the medical system needs to see that research, and they need to see that data, and they need to see what's going on in order to adopt it. And it's a very rigorous program. It has to be, because people are going to initially be skeptical, right, of some of this stuff. I can see the emotional symptoms. I talked to somebody the other day. I heard about their physical symptoms, their emotional symptoms, their history of trauma, their relationship, what's going on in their relationship right now. And I could see very quickly, within 15 to 20 minutes, what the root source of all of it was. Because you see it over and over again, these patterns, right? And so I said, you could work with me and I can help you rebalance that pattern that's happening. But I can't treat your physical symptoms, but I'll tell you, if you want to just focus on that physical symptom, I'll tell you where your best bet of who to go see. Like you're saying, see a DO. You're the second person, by the way, in 2 days that has mentioned that. So that is a common knowledge sort of thing. And I can tell you this person to go if you want to focus just on the relationship stuff. But, if you want the overall big picture, That's what I do. That's why I call myself a mind body health consultant, because I can see how everything intersects and we can get to the root of the source, the underlying source of all of this stuff. So there's so many different ways to work. And again, it goes back to a client's intuition, their intuition about who is a provider that can help them, what they need to be changing. However, I know a lot of people are very resistant to changing their nutrition and changing the things they eat. And so I've now made it, if people want to work with me, I say, I will not work with you unless you're open to changing your nutrition, because it's that powerful in the work that I do as a mental health provider, as a coach, as a consultant. That is the baseline. That's where I start.
Yeah, I meet people where they're at, and I'll often be able to get them there to some degree, because usually they have to be desperate. You know, they have to be feeling so terrible that diet doesn't matter at that point. You know, maybe they're, you know, often still eating, you know, terrible foods as a comfort, because it's like, oh, I feel terrible anyway. Oh, I ate a salad, I didn't feel any better. Well, no, you have to make drastic changes sometimes, especially somebody who's dealing with massive systemic inflammation, which I see a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And they make drastic changes and they see incredible results in 2 weeks, life-changing miracle results in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
And they can make that change in one visit with me. Perfect. Great. I don't need to see somebody visit after visit. If I can give you the information that you need and you will make those changes, perfect. Done.
That's how I work as well, because we don't want to be wasting our time just finding nails to hammer in. You know, we want to really truly empower people to be healthy and stay healthy for a long, long, long life, and then spread that health to their families. Absolutely. And what you were talking about too with inflammation and the cytokine storm, I think it's really interesting, because environmental toxins can create that inflammation, foods can create that inflammation, and stress can create that inflammation. And so we have to be looking at all of these different factors. And I think you and I were talking about before, when we're looking at the data of what's coming out about COVID right now, it's such a tip of the iceberg snapshot of everything that has to do with the immune system health and how lethal this thing really is. Of course, it's a unique thing we've never seen before. So we're still all learning about this, and nobody is an expert yet. Some people are, you know, onto some things and learning some new things about it, which is very fascinating. But for some of those numbers, as you said, they are not capturing like what are their comorbidities. Like, and I just saw that some of that scientists, that research is starting to come out now, where they're looking at the comorbidities of the people that actually were diagnosed with COVID. Also, because full wings of the hospital were shut down into essential workers only, now the hospitals are losing money. And so another thing that seems to be happening, according to some of the articles I'm reading, is that they're putting down COVID on the death certificate just as an assumption, because it was a guess. They didn't test, but they don't have the test. So it might be part of it. And it brings them in more funding, emergency funding, to keep the hospital afloat, which ultimately they need to do to keep treating the actual COVID patients. So it's a systemic issue. And so when we're looking at the data, we have to look at all of these little things that could be going into it. And then also there's the people that are protesting and that are into health freedoms and all of that. And some of these people, I don't want to speak for everybody because I don't know all of them, but I am very much involved in the health freedom movement. And so some of them have been doing all of these things that protect your immune system that you and I have been talking about, and living their life that way for many, many years. And so now they're being told that just one little thing that contributes to their immune system is the only thing that works. And they have to shut down their business. They have to now not have income, all of this. And they're very angry about it. And they're very frustrated. And they're saying, how am I going to save your life? If you've been smoking for 20 years, or you've got yourself into a situation of diabetes or heart disease because of your lifestyle choices for the last 30, 40 years, why is it my responsibility now, who's been living a very clean life, to not go out in public and shut down the whole world to protect you? And so I kind of understand that. It sounds like a non-compassionate response, and maybe in some ways it is, but I can see why people would be angry about that. And so this conversation too of personal responsibility, like, are we taking personal responsibility for our health, our own health? And that is the best way to care for others. One of the phrases in my training in mind body medicine is you have to put your oxygen mask on first. And we seem to have forgotten that, because right now we're asking everybody else to put on their mask. But literally, it's ironic because I went to the bank today, so I had to wear my mask to go into the bank. And I can't breathe very well. And I fainted in January. So this scares me a little bit because I was in a situation where there's so much CO2 and I couldn't get enough oxygen. And now I'm in public and I'm like breathing in my own CO2. And I'm like, am I going to get enough oxygen? And it's a stressful thing for me. So how effective really, are these masks, or is it just we're erring on the side of caution? And if we're erring on the side of caution, is that actually doing damage to some people?
With the data that we have now, do these precautions make sense?
Yeah.
Or, how long do we quarantine healthy people?
Yes.
For the quarantine from the beginning, as you know, like I mentioned, I closed my office 5 days before. I was watching things closely coming out of China starting in January. Not because I expected this to hit the US as hard as it did, because silly me, I thought we might still have a competent CDC and HHS. Nope. That didn't happen,
One thing I so appreciate about you is your balanced viewpoint of things, and you really do your research. And I know when I shared the video of the 2 Bakersfield doctors, has gotten so much backlash right now. I said, look at this. And you immediately looked for the counter argument because you wanted to have a perspective of, of both sides. And you're like, okay,
I wanted to actually check my instincts there, because I saw some major problems with their data analysis immediately. They were such amateur mistakes to make. So that's what people have pointed out, and rightly so. But the thing is, ultimately, I agreed with their decisions. And that was speaking about certain places in California. And so to talk about data for a second, I just pulled up, as of yesterday, for instance, in all of California, confirmed cases, 50,430 cases, 2,047 deaths. Tragic, obviously, every single one of those deaths. Don't want to diminish the terrible tragedy that people are going through. So in California, we have about 40 million people. So that's 0.005% of the population in California who has died. LA County, 24,215 cases, 1,172 deaths. So about half of the cases and deaths in California have been in LA County. And so that's 0.03% of LA County. So again, not to minimize, but when we talk about the actions that are still being taken, and now that we have this data, of course, those numbers are going to be lower because of social distancing. Again, I was for that, but we can't quarantine healthy people for years on end, or even for months on end. It doesn't make sense.
Well, what the epidemiologists are saying about the nature of these viruses is that, you deal with them for, it could be up to 2 years, and then it could come back again in another 10 years. So looking at the overall immune system and all the things that the immune system needs to have the best defenses. And sometimes you're going to lose some of the battles to win the war. And that's what I appreciate about what the Bakersfield doctors were bringing up, especially the incidents of child molestation, domestic violence, all those things, those traumas. So now, because of quarantining healthy people, that is a side effect, is we are having an increase in domestic violence and trauma, which then hugely lowers our immune system. If you look at the ACE study, which is a study that was published in 1998, and it takes about 13 to 20 years for those studies to get integrated into mainstream medicine. I went to my primary care physician about 2 years ago, and I saw the quiz. They gave me the ACE quiz, and I was like, hey, I made it. I've been teaching about this study for a while. But yet, even though it's still there, now there's a new threat, and it's like, oh, never mind. We're not going to pay attention to all of that data now. So it's really interesting. I'm not a numbers person. I have done quantitative research in undergrad. I needed a lot of supervision and guidance and for the statistics and all of that, not my strong point. I just want to put that out there. Now I'm doing qualitative research in my PhD. I think that it's important to look at both the quantitative and the qualitative. And right now we're a society that is so focused on the numbers and the quantitative, but where is the space for the qualitative too, is my point. And so I reached out to a colleague of mine who is a data scientist, who's been doing data analysis for decades, is also a PhD. He basically said the same thing, like there's some flaws in the Bakersfield doctors' computations, but ultimately they're pretty much on. He said it's splitting hairs. It's splitting hairs to overly focus on this mistake they made, because he said when you look at the truly randomized sample that was taken in New York, the percentages are pretty similar. And from what he's seeing is that it looks like about 17% of the population in both California and New York already have antibodies based on the preliminary data. And so the way that I saw it is these Bakersfield doctors are bringing up a really important conversation, and they are sharing their raw data that they've collected. They didn't get grants or funding to do this data properly, to get the peer review process. They're not publishing it. They did a video like we're doing right now, and we've got so overly like nitpicky about every single little talking point. It's like we're watching the forest fire burn down, and we're just focusing on saving this little tree, or what's going on with this tree right now, because this tree does this relationship to that tree. Well, the whole forest is burning. So I appreciate a balanced perspective of looking at both. And again, no answers here, but like, let's look at everything. As a mental health clinician with many years experience, I'm so concerned about the ways that this is impacting our society. And also, I know I'm pretty much suiting up and getting ready and putting myself out there more to be part of the solution, because I know that the mental health field is going to explode. It already has in the last 10 years. It's exploded, and it will continue to do that, I think, after this. The repercussions and the generational trauma, the impact that it could have, is what's concerning me, because that alters our DNA.
I've seen on social media a lot of like joking about drinking at, any time of the day and whatever. And it's funny, I've laughed at plenty of the memes, but you know what? If you're somebody who's dealing with addiction, that's really tough, to have your lack of structure and to not have human connection.
Well, those are the coping skills. I mean, that's one of the conclusions from the ACE study. And when I say ACE study, it's Adverse Childhood Experience Study. So I'll try to put a link to that when I publish this video. It's showing that people reach for substances as a way to self-care. And so if you take away the beaches, you take away the movie theaters, you take away social connection, you take away AA meetings, you take away all of these things, and yes, we can still connect virtually, but it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same as getting a hug. I mean, my research in undergrad had to do with touch and how touch enhances physical attraction. And I found a flaw in a previous social science study that showed that it was the secrecy that impacted attraction, but it's actually the fact that there was a confounding data, which is the touch. The people that were doing the secrecy were also touching. And I was like, it's the touch, not the secrecy. And that's what my study showed. I never published it because I was an undergrad, but this is a really important factor to wellness and making us feel connected to something bigger, for our own health. And we self-medicate through sugar, through alcohol, through drugs, through maybe even risky sex or making risky decisions. All of these things are really important to keep in mind. And when we can relieve that stress and find alternate ways to relieve that stress, you mentioned deep breathing, meditation, that's as a foundational one, then we don't need to reach for those things as much. But we hear these news stories that are getting our fight or flight system engaged. We have people yelling at each other and saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. The polarization that we've experienced in the last few years is just like at maximum capacity now, and it's not good for anyone's stress.
Yeah, I remember, it reminds me of a TED Talk I saw years ago that the guy, I can probably find it if we want to link it, he said the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Yes.
People are missing that right now. Obviously, thankfully, we can connect over technology right now, but it's interesting, this kind of weird place that we're in is kind of the end of where everything's been going. It's like a window to, okay, if everybody just sits on social media all the time and doesn't engage in the real world, this is what it looks like. It's not great, guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's created space for a lot of people to make some really great changes. And several of my patients have actually been willing to make those drastic dietary changes during this time, for instance, and seen awesome results. So, it's not all bad for everybody by any means. The slowing down has been really great for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, the slowing down, absolutely. So it's like, and then it goes back to like the quarantine in the beginning, which was a good idea because we didn't know.
Yeah.
And most people can kind of come back from a month of not working. Even if it does set you back several months or years or whatever else, you can still come back from it. But how much longer, like, can most people handle 3 months or 4 months or 5 months without working or income? What's going to happen? What kind of desperation, might be happening at that point? What kind of stress and being isolated from our communities and our things that lift us up. So again, systems theory. So my master's degree is in systems theory, relational systems, but it's based on the theory that looked at cybernetics and computer systems and biological systems. And I did some training in Bowen family systems theory, which is, he was a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, who actually noticed that all organisms, from the cell to like an ant, to a dog, to a human, operate in predictable ways. And it's depending on the amount of anxiety in the system. I don't know if I ever shared that research paper I wrote with you that compared Bowen family systems theory with traditional Chinese medicine. I will have to send that to you and see what you think, because there's a lot of similarities. And my professor, who is a licensed acupuncturist, I got an A+. He's like, I've never heard of this. Like, this is really cool. And I wrote that paper in 8 hours too. It was the fastest paper ever. Thank you. Sponsored by dark chocolate. That helped me get through. And good music. And good music. But it's the relational system. And so like in Bowen family systems theory, we talk about, he calls it anxiety, but it's energy. It's like this dysfunctional energy, and it's the relation between two things that's a problem, not the person. So in marriage and family therapy, you have a relational issue that you are diagnosing, that relationship dysfunction, not this person or that person. A clinical psychologist might be more likely to diagnose this person as dysfunction or that person. And I know in traditional Chinese medicine, the way that you've described it to me is, it's like the liver isn't the problem, it's the way the pancreas is acting on the liver, or gallbladder is acting on the liver, or whatever else. You're diagnosing the relationship, between things.
Always holistic.
Yeah. And so now if we take that even bigger, so you and I operate from a similar philosophy, a similar paradigm as far as systems. You take that even bigger and to look at the systems dynamics that are happening in society right now, in politics and everything. And like you mentioned, social media, if things get too far out of balance, like with your organ system, everything gets out of balance, you're going to have this like a complete deconstruction. Everything's going to burst open. And so in 2013, I went to this amazing talk at my alma mater for my master's degree at Alliant International University, the Center for Integrative Psychology. They brought in actually who was the president emeritus to the university I was just about to go to, Saybrook. And she talked about the systems theory. And she used to work under Carl Rogers. And so Carl Rogers, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a psychologist who is known for unconditional positive regard. So he thought each client that he saw, if you treat them as if they are, again, the expert of their life, you have unconditional positive regard, compassion, creating that nurturing space, they will get better. You create that environment for them to heal in your therapy office. And so he was really well known for this unconditional positive regard. But what he actually was more interested in, that most people don't know him for, is his study of persons of tomorrow, he called them. And so persons of tomorrow are people that can manage that explosion. When the system totally breaks down, what do? Bowen would say this too. The general population of folks will want to cling to the old. Oh my gosh, this is happening. Let's go back to what worked before. And they want to cling, and they don't want to change the way that they were doing things, whether that be nutrition, whether it be their politics, their religion, their whatever it is that are their ideas. And yet when the old ways don't work anymore because something new has come on the scene, that the old ways aren't going to work, we have to look for new, creative, innovative solutions. And so he was studying world leaders and these folks that had this out of the box thinking and that were able to suspend their previous notions or maybe judgments about things and look and see what is a creative solution. Now, how do we access creativity? Again, meditation, keeping our nervous system calm, eating well, staying very calm. I've gotten criticized a lot for a lot of the things that I've been posting online lately through this. I don't want to go into all the criticisms, but you know, one of them has been that I'm affected by fear or whatever. I am not the slightest bit fearful. From the time that this broke out, I've been curious about it, but not fearful. I've been hesitant to see how this might impact us as a society, a little bit worried about that. But as far as my own health or how to cope with this, not the slightest bit. So that's allowed me to stay very calm and logical and rational. I'm not thinking from a fear brain. I'm thinking from a creative brain. A lot of my work and the ways that I stepped out to be of service right now is doing the free bedtime meditations on Tuesdays and Fridays at 9 p.m. on Instagram and Facebook Live. I'm doing free workshops. I've got one coming up on Tuesday. I've got a support group, a mind body skills group. It's a small group of 9 to 11 people where I teach skills in order to stay calm. Again, that's one of those source solutions that will help everything, because you're dealing with the nervous system and calming that fight or flight. And so now at the societal level, we're seeing everything burst open. So what are those creative, innovative solutions? Have you even thought about this or done any talking to any of your people about how society might change or could change that would actually bring us in more harmony? Your practice is called Health and Harmony Acupuncture. You are a harmony expert.
Where it's really got me thinking is my own need to branch out more into the world, because I'm a little bit allergic to marketing and self-promotion.
Ironic as a Leo, but, yeah, but that's the case.
My business does not have a Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter or anything. I have a responsibility to get this knowledge out there. It's not like I have knowledge that other people don't, but it takes all of us with this knowledge to be just hammering over and over and over again, because it's not coming from the bigger, top down. It needs to be bottom up. A lot of us as practitioners are really embracing the telemedicine thing. When all of this first went down and I'm talking to colleagues, I was so resistant. Now I'm like, this is great, actually. This is wonderful in certain respects. Not for providing acupuncture, I can't do that. But with my functional medicine work that I do, and I have patients who, they want to see me, but they're like, oh, but I have no interest in acupuncture. And, I can offer people so many things other than acupuncture in addition to acupuncture. So for me personally, that's where my head has been at. I took a webinar presented by Jeffrey Bland, who one of the greats in functional medicine, him and some other speakers. And the title of it was Simplexity, which was referring to, it was about COVID. And the subtitle was something like, is COVID the ultimate lifestyle disease? This idea of it's so complex and yet so simple at the same time when we just view it in the paradigm that we already know and viewing it from a preventive standpoint. Once somebody's deathly ill and they're in the hospital and they're desperately trying to figure out what medications to use, how to use a ventilator, not to use a ventilator, totally different discussion, not what we're talking about here. We are talking about getting people healthy, keeping them healthy, increasing their chances that if they do get sick from COVID or any other condition, that they are going to have no symptoms or be, one of the mild cases. That's what we do with our lifestyle medicine, with our holistic healthcare. So, and I'm seeing a lot of other practitioners also embrace that, and we can reach a lot more people that way. As I mentioned, I'm looking forward to hopefully less pollution. I've been mystified by that for years because, research shows that employees are actually more productive when they telecommute. But I think that inertia and fear and inability to make changes has kept those changes from happening. I think that a lot more people will be telecommuting, which is better for the environment and better for those people. I've seen people where they get a new job and they've got an hour plus commute each way each day, and it completely changes their life for the worse, of course.
Yeah. Just when the hotel shut down, I ended up saving about 8 to 10 hours at least a week. I'm not going back and forth just for workshops, not even mentioning like a hypnosis session or something that somebody might book at the last minute. And I live close. So, but it was really shocking to me to see how much of my time was actually being spent on that, and then bringing the kids to and from school, those little time things that add up. And so having that extra time now, I've put that into, again, this YouTube channel, doing these things that I've wanted to get going for a while. However, it then is sort of balanced out by having to wait in line at the grocery store, and the grocery store closing at 5 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. and all of these other things, you know, so we're not fully seeing the full benefit, but it's the life that is possible is exciting to me. I even do hypnosis online. And it works. It's an energy technique, you know? And some people have said, well, does hypnosis really work online? And I said, yes, because I'm not touching you when I see you in person. I'm using my voice to get you into this hypnotic state. So my voice works online as well. I just need to see you so I can see what's going on in the little twitches in your body or whatever else. But now that everybody's having to work online, I've not had anybody question online hypnosis or online, you know, I did a past life regression session, which is a form of hypnosis yesterday. It does open up that avenue for people for sure. I think to look outside of the box and start doing things differently.
All the dogs of the world are really happy right now.
All the time, clearly. Clearly the dogs of the world are really happy. Yeah, and honestly, like, it's been really nice having my kids around. I realized that's one of the first things I noticed too, is that having them home was less of a stress than taking them to school, because I'm not having to run around like a crazy person. They're very sensitive to energy and whatnot too. They're not getting the stressors from their peers, you know, and being in those big crowds, and academic standards are not so pressing right now. We'll see how that transforms, but it's been really nice. It's been a nice rhythm, you know, to have. And I just realized I really enjoy spending time with my children, which is a nice thing. And I really enjoy the lifestyle that I've already created, you know, that it has set me up to thrive even with this. There's things I miss. I'm really missing the beach, the gym, the yoga studio, the grocery. I always shop like a half hour before closing on a Wednesday anyway, because I don't like crowds. And so I like having 5 feet of distance when you know, standing in a line. I like that. Now I went to the bank, the line was outside. You weren't allowed into the bank, inside the building, until the teller was ready. I kind of like that al fresco style business. You know, that's not such a bad thing in my mind. We've been
efficiency into systems.
Yes.
We're not wasting as much time with things.
Let's be logical. Let's look at what works good for everyone, right? Let's not be wasteful. I think, you know, I'm into astrology too, and this whole astrological thing is Uranus and Taurus. And Taurus is the sign of the divine feminine. It's the sign of abundance. It's the sign of our financial, you know, wellness. It's the sign of food, the Mother Earth, like the sensual things. And those are all the things that Uranus is shaking up right now. Like, are you doing it right? Let's bring in some innovation. If you don't believe in astrology, then that's fine. You can just listen to everything else that we're saying. But I look at lots of different things. And then the other thing I wanted to mention with systems is, we're talking about the authority, whether it's the information coming out of the CDC and the small little tip of the iceberg that they're only telling us about as far as wellness and the immune system, and also, you know, the doctors, and how some of the doctors get flustered when you bring up nutrition because they didn't really have any nutrition training. Then this patriarchal notion of an authority telling you what to believe, and then you follow that authority, is being shaken up as well. And we already saw some of that happen with the Me Too movement. I don't know if you've thought about this, but I've thought about this because I make jokes in my head, you know. It's silly, but is this a post Me Too, I don't like to say conspiracy theory, but curiosity theory, where now, you know, women have that 5 feet or 6 feet of distance on dates. You're both wearing a mask. You don't have to worry about him sneaking a kiss. Like, it's just an ultra protective mode. And I think I was telling you before too, when I came back from the beach today, I was just, you know, at the stoplight, kind of looking at my phone, full like double, triple chin mode or whatever, blasting my music, windows open, and this guy from the car over yells, "You're hot." And normally I'd be like, oh, that's so obnoxious. But there's something about this time right now. And then I just kind of looked at him and I started laughing. And then he's like, I just wanted you to know that. And I thought it was just sweet. The energy with which he engaged, it didn't irritate me. And maybe it's because I haven't been at the clubs getting my ass grabbed, and I haven't been getting sexually harassed because I haven't been out, and he is probably, that was his way to kind of make connection from a distance. I thought it was fairly respectful, honestly. I don't think it was the energy, all of our systems are shaking up a little bit in the context.
Some of it for the better. In fact, in your interview with Dr. Jen, you guys were talking about first dates being on Zoom now, which I was like, no, that's pretty great, actually, in a lot of ways. I wonder how much of that will stick, because the women in particular that I know who have done online dating have been exhausted by it after a few months of all the effort of, going out to some place to meet somebody and to know within 5 minutes that you have no interest, and then you have to go through this charade.
It takes away that pressure of the physical contact,
Yeah.
and just suspends that for a little bit. I think the question I'd like to end with is, what was your lifestyle before this? And what have you changed now to have that optimal wellness, awesome immune system lifestyle?
I am very fortunate to live in a house with a lovely backyard. So I have definitely been enjoying my share of naked sunbathing almost every day, getting my vitamin D.
Yep, on board.
With lots of privacy. The gate to the backyard is squeaky on purpose.
Yes.
If it's opened immediately. So just enjoying nature to the degree that I can. It's been really nice. I've been cycling through Griffith Park, which is a mile from my house. I'm really lucky with that. And then keeping up with great nutrition. I mentioned the smoothies. I have one of those almost every day, sometimes 2 a day. And it's like, that's my meal, Keeping up with supplements, C, especially C and zinc, but I'll take the C every now and then. But just keeping with a good diet. I do take my 5,000 IU vitamin D every day with a meal. That's a good dosage for most adults. The best solution, though, is to get your blood level checked and see where you're at. Research points to about 50 ng per DL is a really good target dose for most people. People dealing with autoimmune conditions, you want to work with your practitioners to probably go about that, somewhere around 75, but work with your practitioners with that. I work with. Yeah.
Side note, somebody on my Facebook friends list just posted, she's into integrative medicine as well, and she's been on the vitamin D deep dive into the literature lately, and she did find something that showed that, I can't remember the percentage, but there was a high percentage of COVID deaths that, the people were vitamin D deficient, or COVID infections that came in for treatment were vitamin D deficient, where very few people that actually had been above that marker got an infection. So I remember one of the first things you said when this happened, vitamin D is dirt cheap. Like, it is such a good solution for our wellness and, immune system maintenance.
Yeah, and you want it strong, but not overly strong, not causing allergies and autoimmune conditions. So I'm excited to see that research, because that's been my major hunch throughout this. We're seeing these higher rates of deaths in Black people. Well, there's many reasons for that, right? We know social determinants. There's all kinds of reasons why Black people are oftentimes not getting this good health care, issues with diet, issues with comorbidities. But vitamin D, let's look at that. I want to see the data there, because the melanin prevents the vitamin D from penetrating the skin. So the darker your skin, the more important it is, generally speaking, to supplement with vitamin D. In my experience, even people who are out in the sun a lot, even people with light skin, still need to supplement. Maybe not all throughout the year, but again, that's why it's important to have your levels checked and to see what's right for you.
The last time I had my levels checked was a few years ago. But at the time I was taking about 2,000 IUs a day of vitamin D, and my levels were only at 30. I think 28 is like the minimum.
Yeah, I've seen some labs bring it up to 32 is the minimum that they want to see. That's the thing. Those of us in the integrative world, we've known of the importance of vitamin D for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. It's been so obvious in the literature for least 25 years, I'd say.
Yes, at least 30 probably.
It's been part of my practice from the beginning, and it was only in the past, I'd say 5 years, where I see MDs regularly begin to test vitamin D status. Not everybody, but I'd say the majority now do, which is great. And I'm always, telling patients when they're going in for their physical, ask your doctor to check your vitamin D levels, just in case they weren't already going to. People won't feel unwell. They can have poor vitamin D status and they feel fine. They think, I'm healthy. I'm not vulnerable to this. But if you don't have a good vitamin D, you could absolutely be vulnerable to all kinds of infections and autoimmune conditions. And so low vitamin D status is very highly correlated with autoimmune conditions.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I've been taking my C. I like a lipospheric C because it's really well absorbed. You can take just one dosage. But just good old, if you're not getting enough in your diet, you want at least 1,000 milligrams up to potentially 2,000 milligrams a day. But what you want to do is take smaller doses more frequently, because otherwise you're not going to absorb it. About 200, 250 milligrams 4 times a day, 5 times a day, depending on what you're taking to get that 1,000 milligram. Again, look at what you're eating diet-wise. That's important too. You can get it all from diet. Awesome. You don't need to supplement. 2 Brazil nuts a day is the perfect dosage for selenium, which is also great for your immune system. No more, no less. That's all you need, 2 Brazil nuts. And then I eat very much primarily a plant-based diet, which is pro-inflammatory, which is a good thing. If you are going to eat meat, of course, make sure it's nice and clean and humane as can be.
Because the animal's stress hormones from living a stressed life and then being slaughtered in a very stressful way, you ingest their stress hormones. So now they're adding to your stress hormones. However, there are some beneficial things in meats like amino acids, which are precursors to neurotransmitters, which now we're tapping into, my field. So again, that's one of those things. It's like intuition. What are your specific needs? But, we do need, some of us do need that animal protein, but how do we get it in the best form available all the way around? Yeah.
My message would absolutely just be take care of yourself through all of this, all of the basic boring stuff. Healthy diet and do the self-care on a day-to-day basis. It's not about going to yoga once a week. Yeah. It's about maybe doing yoga 10 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be an hour. It's just having that routine and creating that time for yourself. And my patients who are doing that right now, and they're really taking advantage of this time. I saw somebody yesterday, she said, I have never felt better in terms of stress and moods. She's loving this. It's obviously, it's not that she isn't empathetic to what's going on with other people, but for herself, she's absolutely loving this. And she's one of the people who, she made those changes. We changed her diet a month ago, just completely, every symptom she had is gone.
Not all of the self-care things have to be boring either. Orgasms are amazing, amazing for the immune system, self-care, endorphins, and you don't even have to have a partner. Dr. Jen was talking about that, how she was like amazed and so happy that the government actually mentioned masturbation for the first time ever. Like it only took a viral pandemic for the powers that be to, mention the healthy sexuality in a sex positive message. Maybe a good place to end is just reminding everybody who again is very programmed throughout their lifetime to be listening to authority as the ultimate authority and not to question it and these other viewpoints and perspectives. We have to look at some of the companies, the huge, huge, huge companies that are profiting from polluting the environment, that are profiting from pharmaceuticals, that are profiting from some of these things, and are in even big tech, profiting from rolling out 5G or these sorts of things. And they're not going to be the ones that are funding the studies that show that those things might be harmful or wanting to look at that. And they are the ones that have the money to have lobbyists go in and block these grassroots efforts to bring true health. And they do have the money to back elections of certain officials who agree to protect them or not, or loosen regulations maybe on some of what they're doing. And so we have to keep that into consideration when we look at the authorities who are giving us this information. Who is funding them? Who is benefiting from that? And understanding that that might be part of the reason why you haven't heard this yet. And and really thinking critically about what's going on. Again, doing what feels good to you, taking care of yourself. Again, going back to systems theory, Bowen family systems theory, we always try to change everybody around us. Even in a relationship, we want our partner to change. We see what's wrong with them, but the only thing we can change is ourselves. And if we get to be healthier and we change our way of relating to our partner, they start to change. It's the system.
The best case scenario.
Yes. The best case scenario.
Or the relationship ends.
Yes, or the relationship ends. And that happens. There's toxic people, just like there's toxic substances that are not good for the body. And that person might be good for this person, but not good for you. And so that has to be honored as well. Wow, we did a marathon here. Thank you so much for putting yourself out there. I feel like things are changing day by day, moment to moment. Digest it all. Work on your digestion, your actual physical digestion, as well as your emotional, intellectual digestion. Make sure that you're able to take in nutrients and take in facts and take in all of it. Where can people find you, Sarah?
So my website would be a good place to find me, which is For Health and Harmony, FOR, Health and Harmony.
As I mentioned before, I do bedtime meditations every Tuesday and Friday night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That broadcast live on Instagram Live as well as Facebook Live for anybody who wants to learn how to calm down their fight or flight. I had a friend text me today and say, thank you. When I don't say goodbye at the end, it's because you literally put me to sleep. And I was like, oh, yay. I'm so honored to be able to tuck her in at night. So please join that. I also am doing mind body skills groups. I'm the third week into a round of 8 weeks. I'll be having another round starting after probably in the summer for anybody interested in that. And I'm doing a free workshop on Tuesday, Cinco de Mayo, 5/5 at 6 p.m., which I'm teaming up with Sonia Life Fitness. She's going to do 30 minutes of Pilates. I'm going to do about 15 minutes of guided imagery after the Pilates. And she's going to be focusing on second and third chakra, your core strength. So our core strength is important for our power, our sexuality. Second chakra is abundance. It's stronger orgasms. It's our third chakra is our power in the world, our self-esteem, our intuition. So those are the areas that we're going to be focusing on in this workshop. Like I said, it's free. I'll put the link below here, and I would love to have anybody join us who wants to work on those things so that you have a strong core, strong fitness for life. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Connect with you as always.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week.